Welcome to a guide to every deck in Modern. Today I'm looking at Murktide. Murktide is to Modern what Delver is to Legacy. It's the premier Ragavan and Dragon's Rage Channeler deck and one of Modern's best. Murktide is an efficient deck that uses a combination of aggressive creatures backed up by cheap removal, counterspells, and card filtering. The most important cards are Dragon's Rage Channeler since it filters card selection so efficiently and fuels Murktide Regent, the other most important card in the deck and its primary win condition. The deck's best start is a turn 1 DRC followed by Mishra's Bauble to fuel the graveyard and enable Delirium. Another common line is to wait until turn 4, then play Murktide Regent with counterspell backup to protect it. The deck can also steal games with Blood Moon, especially when you can play it turn 2 off a Ragavan treasure. However, there isn't much more to say about the cards individually. Rather, the deck can be discussed more broadly in a strategic sense. The thing to remember about Murktide is that it's a tempo deck above and beyond anything else. It isn't necessarily trying to win as fast as possible, but it does get worse the longer the game goes. The sweet spot is around turns 1 through 4. Past that, other decks have an opportunity to leverage a resource advantage over it and find answers to its sparse threats. There are some additional considerations regarding how to build the deck which I'll discuss in the How to Beat It section. How to sideboard. Most cards in the deck need to stay in the deck. You can, however, shave on the 4th copy of a lot of cards. However, it's important to keep in a certain number of each type of card to fuel the Delirium on Dragon's Rage Channeler. You can cut all copies of a card when it's bad or dead in certain matchups, for example, Unholy Heat against Belcher, Ragavan against Yawgmoth, or Spell Pierce against Death and Taxes. The sideboard is a mix of targeted hate cards and specific answers that will shift and change with the metagame. How to beat it. It pays to remember the card the deck is named after. While it can win by slowly chipping away with DRC and Ragavan, the deck leans heavily on Murktide Regent. You can sometimes beat the deck solely by answering Murktide. Cards like Solitude, Path to Exile, and Terminate are all good answers to Murktide. This is why it can have a rough matchup against decks packing a lot of answers to big creatures such as 4-color Blink. Because Murktide requires a stacked graveyard for Delve, you can also answer it with bounce spells like Teferi Time Raveler or by preemptively exiling the graveyard before it's cast. Graveyard Hate in general is good against the deck since it severely reduces the power of both Murktide and DRC. Rest in Peace in particular is brutal. The deck's primary weakness is its heavy reliance on so few threats. As such, some players opt to include more threats, typically Brazen Borrower, Fury, or Jace the Mind Sculptor. Another issue the deck can run into is limited options to deal with resolved permanents if it can't tag them with a counterspell. Murktide's removal is all damage based, and while Unholy Heat will kill most things, it won't handle everything. Notable examples are Death Shadow and opposing Murktides. Some players splash into a 3rd color for additional threats or answers at the expense of a worse mana base and therefore losing Blood Moon. Green grants access to Tarmogoyf, white to Prismatic Ending. Alternatively, some players mix the deck with Death Shadow for another cheap big threat. Tips and tricks. It's easy to forget Murktide's 4th ability, but it matters. Typically, it gets triggered by casting a 2nd Murktide. If you plan to cast 2 Murktides back to back, exile as few instants and sorceries as possible at the first one so that both get boosted by the second one. If you don't have Delirium and you want to cast spells but don't want to attack with DRC, say because the opponent has a blocker for it, you can cast them in your second main phase. You can target yourself with Mishra's Bauble and then fetch if you don't like your top card. If you're 1 card type short of Delirium and don't have an instant in your graveyard, you can target your own DRC with Unholy Heat. Heat will deal 2 damage, but DRC won't die. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Murktide. I want to thank my fellow players in the Magic community for whom sharing their experiences helps make these guides possible. You can find additional resources, such as an up-to-date deck list, in the description. If you think I left out anything important or got something wrong, please leave your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned to see what deck we look at next time.